Hi everyone, this is Patti Conklin, Healing Within and Adventure Inside. Thank you so much for being a part of today's show and listening to my thoughts and the thoughts of my guest, Dr. Fenesa Hall. I like to say Frenesa Hall, MD. But what's wonderful about Frenesa is that Frenesa not only comes from a Western background in medicine, but she comes from and has continued to develop a very holistic approach within her practice and within working with clients. And while the physical body is so important in terms of good health and so forth, we also feel that your emotional health is really number one. How do we think? How do we really make use of positive perceptions? And one of the things that we always come back to after 20 years of doing programs together is personal responsibility. And so we'd like to talk to you about personal responsibility and what it means to you. And you may be saying, I already know what personal responsibility is. But give us a chance, because through our years of collective work, I think we've really come up with ways that maybe you think or you're not sure how personal responsibility means to you, and how to set up boundaries when you do need to take personal responsibility, setting up boundaries that are healthy, that are appropriate, that are effective in order for you to take personal responsibility and self-care for yourself. So Frenesa, thank you so much for being a part of things as always.
Thank you for having me.
So personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. We come back to this all the time.
Over and over.
Over and over. One of the things that I always harp about, and I know you harp is probably the right word, is that no one can make you angry. No one can make you feel sad. Those are emotions that you choose in the moment. And part of the personal responsibility is owning that you're the one who's being triggered.
Right.
The person who's saying it, that's on them. You can't control what they're going to say. You can only control how you're going to respond to it.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about when you look at personal responsibility within self-care of a patient. You know, how do you help them understand that it's not about taking some pills to feel better? It's about changing that emotional perception of how they're looking at their life if they're feeling massive victim. And getting them to realize that they're feeling massive victim. Talk to me about that.
Well, you know, our system indoctrinates physicians in such a way that isn't really part of the mix. Mm-hmm. Because doctors, not as much today, but years ago, I was sort of in that in-between class of old school, new school, and the doctor was sort of the, not God, but
God.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it was.
And so people were trained to go to the doctor for the answer. Okay. So that was the setup. And so it took the responsibility out of the patient's hands. So early on, you watch like Dr. Kildare or, you know, those old movies or shows about medicine.
Right.
And the doctor was very patronizing, right? They told you what to do, patted you on your hand and said, okay, this is what you do.
Right.
And it wasn't, let's engage and let's come to a solution together, or here are my recommendations and you decide what you want to do.
Right.
And so that personal responsibility piece wasn't prominent. Now, with litigation, though,
sure,
personal responsibility has gone to the top, probably ad nauseum, like, here's a consent.
Right.
Sign it, because it's your responsibility to make the decision. So things have really changed. But not really, because ultimately it's always been our responsibility to do things for our benefit or our detriment.
Yeah.
But we get to choose.
Right.
Now, people come to me for advice, for counsel, for recommendations about what to do. And as I say, I'm calling out the plays, but you got to run the play.
Yep.
So the personal responsibility comes in of, one, seeking counsel from experts, whether it's a chiropractor or an allopathic doctor or
whatever we call you. This person over here.
Right. And we tell people what we perceive to be what they need to do.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
The first step is to be responsible and recognize you need help, and you go and seek the help. But then once you seek the help, then it's up to you to either follow that advice or choose what it is you want to do and then do it.
Yeah.
And then if you choose not to, then you have to own the consequences of that as well.
Absolutely.
And so that's really the personal responsibility. You have to own what your decisions are and the outcomes from those decisions.
Yeah.
As a physician, people are coming to me for help. And so these are my recommendations. And so you have to follow through.
Right.
And I think that's sort of that baseline level of responsibility in a physician-patient relationship.
Sounds simple, not easy to do. I think that if you're an individual who's going through a health crisis or you're going through a situation where you need advice, you need help, and so forth, it's really imperative that you look at yourself, that you sit and do some journaling, and you understand that you're part of the equation. Medicine, energy medicine, whether it's Western, whether it's Eastern, it's not going to heal you. The understanding of what the issues are in your tissues is what's going to begin to help you being able to be real with yourself. Because if you're not real with yourself, it doesn't matter what we say.
Right.
Right? It's you being willing to say, yeah, you know what, I think I've got this issue. Because the bottom line is we all have issues, right? And we all dig through those layers and layers and layers and layers. So you can't say, well, I had a horrible childhood and my parents were so nasty and this is why I am the way I am. Well, that may be the case. Maybe you did have a nasty childhood. Maybe your parents were cruel, mean, whatever you want to say. But you have choice in this moment to change how you feel about that experience. And I think it's just so imperative that it's not my parents were wrong. This is what my soul came in to learn. And I have choice as to whether or not I make it a negative portion of my life or a positive portion of my life. And we can help put you on that track. But if you're not willing to acknowledge it or move forward with it, then what are we really doing?
Right.
Right.
What did you get from that experience? Mm-hmm. And you're right, what am I learning about myself that helps me progress to be a better me from that experience? Or am I stuck in that experience? I had a negative childhood and that's why I smoke and I drink and I feel like crap, and right. Can't you help me?
Right. Right.
And it's like,
right.
Well, you're stuck here.
Right.
And
right.
then you're giving reason
right.
for behaviors that are unhealthy and
right.
saying, well,
right.
This is default. I can't help it because of this.
Right. I mean, the thing is it allows the person who's stuck there to play the victim.
Right.
It allows you to play the victim and not take personal responsibility for your life. And it's amazing, no matter what your income level is, your education level, it's amazing how many people are terrified of taking personal responsibility of their life. And they would rather stay in a disease process or an emotional process that will keep them from moving into that personal responsibility.
Which then gets you through to improvement.
Absolutely.
And it really is, it is a fascinating thing, because I've had patients come to me for help and then not do anything that I've requested that they do, and then come back and complain because they're not better.
Right.
Which always left me scratching my head, and I'm like, okay, if I give you the recipe for a cake and you don't follow the recipe, do you really expect to have that cake?
Right.
Like,
right.
So it's just, it's an interesting thing. And it can be scary.
Yeah.
It can be very scary to address your demons from your life. Mm-hmm. But once you do that and you own it, then you get to break those bonds that are holding you in the past.
Right.
And then you get to create this new future, and that new future may be, better health, better relationship.
Right.
Better job.
Right.
Right. So we get to choose whether we stay stuck in the past or own it, work through it, and move towards being a better version of ourselves.
I think it's also really important to be aware and continue understanding the difference between judgment and discernment when you're making changes in your life. Understand that judgment has an emotional attachment to the end result, or it has an expectation to the end result. Discernment means, you know what? You're living your life this way, and as a soul, I absolutely honor where you are in your life. But as a human being, I think I'm going to take a different path. And there's no emotional attachment to the end result. It's just you're walking two different paths, and that's perfect, and that's okay. But it kind of reminds me of children getting ready to go off to college. You get into that last year and a half, and how many times do kids start acting out? Parents are attempting to, put more constrictions on because, the kids are acting out. One of the dynamics that's taking place is the kids are acting out because they love their parents. And the fear of moving to their own place, of going off to college, may be exciting, but what are they going to do without mom and dad? And so what they end up doing is start disassociating with their parents. The dissociative behavior in anger, or just not talking to them, or whatever. And they're not even conscious that they're doing it. It's a very subconscious process, but it gives them a reason. I'm so angry here, or, I'm just held back so much. I can't wait to get my own place. It's a very natural way we go through transitions. And so if parents understood that that's what their kids are doing, because the kids are scared about going on by themselves, they want to, but subconsciously it's like they have to take responsibility now for their own lives. So the way that we can break off from people the easiest is through anger.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when I'm ticked, I'm ticked.
Yeah.
And so it's easier to walk away from someone that you're angry with than to walk away from someone that you love. And so you see that dynamic play out in marriages. You play it out between children and their parents as they're moving into their own life. An individual, a couple who have their first child, And all of a sudden the grandparents are butting in going, but I did it this way, but I did it this way. And, and all of a sudden you're butting heads going, I'm going to raise my child the way I want to raise my child. And the grandparents are going, yeah, but. And I had to learn very easily or very quickly when I started having grandchildren was not to insert my voice unless I was asked for it. Right. Because they, as a couple, were going to parent totally differently than how I was going to parent. And just because my boys turned out awesome, because they did, doesn't mean that I know how to raise their children, because the new dynamic is the spouse, right? And they have to come together on how they're parenting. And so I take personal responsibility if I say something that I maybe should have been quiet about or didn't really have to say, then I have to own it. And I'll pull the adult children aside and say, sorry, I just, I just in Oma mode and I was moving forward.
Right.
And they can accept that. But
because you owned it.
I owned it. But if I were constantly telling them, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way, then we'd start having friction, not only amongst my adult children and their spouses, but I would have less restriction towards or less access to the children. Right?
Right. It would be counter to what you're trying to do.
Right.
I think that what you're also saying is that it is, as far as anger, that's a safe emotion because we practice it all the time.
True.
What we don't practice is forgiveness.
Yeah.
We don't practice, I'm sorry.
Very true.
And that's personal responsibility to say, I'm sorry that I did that. Yeah. Or for the parent with the child and to say to the child, you know what? It's a scary time for you to go to college and I understand it and you do need to separate.
Yeah.
But let's not separate angrily.
Right.
But there's, I don't have children, so full disclaimer here, but there's no handbook on how to do it.
On how to raise your children.
And it took me a while to come to terms with what I initially have deemed as failings of my parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you take a step back and you look at your life, and I feel like my life is great. I've got great friends. I have a great partner. I'm employed. I enjoy my work,
right,
et cetera, healthy. I get to play music, whatever. But all of the things I experienced in my life up to today have gotten me here.
Right. And so, you never would have gotten here
without my parents.
Without the parents and the exact dynamics that you had.
Good things, the bad things, all of it.
Right.
And what I've learned is that it's neither good nor bad.
Right.
It just was.
That's right.
And I learned from that. Some of the things that my parents did to me, or for me, I guess I should say now.
Right.
Instilled in ethics in me that have served me very well. I wanted those new Nike high top basketball sneakers, and they were $30. This is back in the 70s.
Oh, you're aging
$30
yourself.
was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And my mom was, oh no, I'll buy you those $10 PF Flyers.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I want high top leather sneakers. And she said, well, you better get a job and earn the other 20.
Right.
Because I'm not paying $30.
Because I'm not paying for it. Yep.
So I got a job, scooping ice cream, working in a corner candy store type place.
Yeah.
Saved my money, and I bought my sneakers. And I'll tell you, that was one of a pivotal moment for me.
Yeah.
Because it showed me and it taught me that I could take responsibility to figure out how to get what I wanted, and I could depend on me to do it. So
but in the moment, the
youngin'
was mad.
Yeah. I knew my mom had $30. It's like I saw it. But, and so, and that's kind of a humorous example. But it's really a blessing to have had parents
right.
that weren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
Neither am I.
Right.
But they did the best they could
mm-hmm.
with the tools they had at the time.
Yeah.
And when I look back and I look at my life, and I owe them so much to the development of me, to the That's me right. I am today.
That's right.
And so we can choose to harbor resentment and blame our parents for what our life is like today. Bottom line is, your life is the way it is today because of you, not your parents.
That's right. That's right.
Your choices. My choices, your choices.
Yeah.
We are responsible as adults.
Well, it's really remembering that good always comes out of bad. And I don't care how devastating your life was. Well, I do care how devastating. But in the big picture, it doesn't matter to me what your life was. It's understanding what good came out of your life because something good did. You are who you are. And that doesn't mean that we don't have issues. That means that we're continuing to strive to overcome issues. And I think one of the things that is important in all of that, in the personal responsibility, is accountability with each other. I mean, we've held each other accountable through the years. We've had a strong friendship and neighbors and so forth, but we've had our moments. We've had our moments. She threatened to tie me up and make me watch a chick flick. That was like all it took to get me to go do what she needed me to do or wanted me to do, because that was a threat that was just unbearable. She did. She can be mean at times. But I think the accountability, and I'll kind of close out with this because it was a really important thing, is that I remember getting into a conflicted conversation with my son and daughter-in-law, and topic isn't important, but I was really standing my ground, and they were both furious at me. And in my family, my children and I come to compromises. There was no compromise in this conversation. And I ended up going downstairs and, being by myself. And he came downstairs and he's like, look, I want to apologize for getting so upset and yelling at you. However, I need you to know that what you were saying, I personally felt was beneath you. And when my child uses that languaging in a calm manner, it forced me to look back and go, wow, what was my responsibility in that conversation that made him feel his perception that I was saying something that he deemed beneath me, and he had never used those words before. And so while we were contentious during that conversation, he came to apologize for his upset, but he also made it clear that he felt my stance was beneath me. And we hugged each other and said, I love each other, and so on and so forth. But conflict doesn't mean you walk away being angry. Conflict means you really attempt to hear what the other person's saying. So I want you all to think about that and just think about how that pertains to your life. So I want to thank you, Dr. Hall, for being a part of today's show. And thank you so much, folks, for tuning in. This is Healing Within, an Adventure Inside. and it's always an adventure. Thank you for being with us.